think the king right now, his best bet would be to distance himself completely, make it clear to Harry that the Sussexes are not welcome at all in Britain for a very, very long time.
Remember, 47 minutes is not a reconciliation. It's not a get-together, we're so thrilled to see you.
Meghan Markle felt humiliated on Prince Harry's most recent UK trip, and that the trip turned into a nightmare.
King Charles has officially met Meghan, Harry, Archie and Lily at Highgrove House, his Gloucestershire country residence.
She actually sort of fueled his grievances. What happened until he met Meghan, he was quite happy.
King Charles still can be manipulated by Harry, and certainly the promise of spending time with his grandchildren.
Tom Bower says he has uncovered what he believes really happened during Meghan Markle's widely discussed 47-minute visit to Highgrove. In his version of events, that may help explain why the meeting unfolded so differently from what many had expected. What was supposed to be a moment that might help rebuild family ties instead became, according to some commentary, a tightly controlled encounter, one that left behind more questions than answers.
Prince Harry, Meghan Unsparkle and the two children to see their grandfather. We're not quite sure how long it lasted. Some people are saying an hour, some are saying more. The fallout from it has been we're all sitting waiting for it to be leaked. Nothing so far. Apparently William was appalled. The following day, Harry looked like the cat that got the cream, because you and I both know that the Sussex brand's dead now, isn't it, anywhere in the world, unless they can actually prove to have some link still with the very family they spend their entire life slagging off.
Even more surprising, Bower is now reportedly warning King Charles about what this moment could mean going forward. And by the end of this video, it becomes clearer why he believes those 47 minutes may have shifted the bigger picture in a major way.
Of course, it's been hugely damaging, and the popularity of the royal family has fallen because of Meghan and Harry's antics. So I think the king right now, his best bet would be to distance himself completely, make it clear to Harry that the Sussexes are not welcome at all in Britain for a very, very long time. And Harry just will have to reflect how he's going to reorganize the next few tens of years of his life.
Tom Bower is not just another royal biographer. He has built a reputation as one of the most closely followed voices commenting on Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and their ties to the royal family. Over the years, his reporting and opinions have drawn plenty of attention, largely because they dig into the choices, tensions, and public controversies linked to the couple. That is exactly why anything he says tends to get people talking, and why his commentary often lands right in the middle of the wider debate. That is why his comments are getting so much attention, because whenever Bower weighs in, people tend to read between the lines and look for what he may be implying about the larger royal fallout. In online discussions, some viewers have treated his warning as a sign that this was never just a routine visit, but a moment with bigger consequences waiting underneath the surface. Others, though, say the situation is still being interpreted through opinion and speculation, not confirmed facts. Either way, the reaction shows how quickly a single encounter can become part of a much larger conversation about trust, distance, and what may happen next behind palace walls.
I mean, I don't think she'd be the block on reconciliation. She would say to Charles, it's not going to work out well, Charles. Do what you want. But in my view, give it a pass.
Well, who's the block? William?
I think William's the block. And also the fact that Charles standing with Harry, he knows it can only end badly.
And this time, Bower's latest comments about that 47-minute Highgrove meeting are prompting some serious questions. In his telling, Harry and Meghan came to the United Kingdom with one main goal, which some observers believe was to undo the fallout from Megxit and try to rebuild their connection with the royal family.
But I do think that when you're mocked so publicly as they've been, their value begins to nosedive pretty quickly. And I don't think they're finding any more sources of income. And with the stream of money they're spending on security, on mortgages, on just plain living, I think they can see the end of the road within 5 years at best. And they've got a real financial problem now.
After stepping back from royal duties, Harry and Meghan's situation was widely seen as having shifted in a big way. Their commercial projects faced growing scrutiny, Meghan's lifestyle brand ran into reported challenges, and some of Harry's charitable efforts also came under added pressure from public attention.
The point is that Meghan knows what she'd like to do, but can't deliver. I mean, she cannot be a Martha Stewart. She can't be a Gwyneth Paltrow. She can't recruit people who do it. I mean, the great problem in this whole merchandising and branding is that she has neither the money, the talent, the inspiration, the people to put it together for her. Then she sort of come up with a ridiculous story that Netflix were going to produce it for her and sell it, which Netflix quickly denied.
According to Tom Bauer's view, those setbacks made it even more important for the couple to rebuild their public image. He argues that reconnecting with the royal family may have been the clearest path to restoring the relevance, credibility, and attention they once seemed to command. That is why people are reading Bauer's comments so closely, because the bigger issue here is not just one visit, but what it seems to suggest about where things stand now. Online, some commentators have taken his remarks as a sign that the gap between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family may still be wider than it first appeared. Others caution that this is still a story shaped by interpretations, reactions, and disputed commentary, not clear confirmation from anyone involved. Either way, the attention around it shows how even a brief meeting can be turned into a larger debate about image, trust, and whether any real reset is actually possible. And that is exactly why this latest round of discussion has kept building, because every small detail seems to invite a new wave of speculation.
Meghan and Harry's crisis, completely of their own making, is they have no major projects, no major money earners. And so they're more desperate than ever. And I think that they don't know what to do other than to try and come back to Britain and rebuild themselves as some sort of members of the royal family.
They still needed a believable reason to reconnect with the royal family, and in Tom Bauer's view, the Invictus Games gave them that opening. As the founder of the event, Prince Harry already had a well-established reason to be in the UK, which made the visit look tied to his long-running commitment to Invictus rather than a direct move back toward royal life.
Oh, I think he desperately does want to come back. I think that's what the whole Invictus Games in Birmingham was all about and is all about. But I think now he's got a huge problem that they're increasingly unpopular. The king can't face him in the way he wants in public.
In Bauer's view, that timing made the whole situation feel especially important. And what happened next is where the story takes a surprising turn.
I think that's what the Invictus Games, which is this very splendid competition for wounded servicemen, is going to start in Birmingham next year, but there's a rehearsal later in the summer. And Harry is determined to come, and if he could, he'd bring Meghan and somehow work his way back in so that they have status. My feeling is that the king might be slightly sympathetic.
King Charles, still balancing his role as monarch and father, reportedly agreed to meet with Harry during the visit, a detail that immediately drew attention online. Reports also suggested that Harry was offered a stay at Buckingham Palace. But according to those same accounts, he did not take up the offer straight away. By the time he later changed his mind, the arrangements were said to have shifted, and the offer was reportedly no longer available. That detail alone is what kept the conversation moving, because once the palace offer was said to have changed, people online started reading the visit as something more loaded than a simple family catch-up. Some viewers saw it as a sign that every part of the meeting was being carefully managed, while others argued that the timeline only looked messy from the outside and should not be treated as proof of anything bigger. Still, the way these reports were discussed added another layer to the story, especially since the whole point of the visit had been to keep things looking calm and purposeful. Instead, the reaction turned the moment into a fresh round of questions about timing, access, and how much trust was actually there behind the scenes.
The royals offered Harry and his family use of Buckingham Palace for the duration of their stay. It's self-evidently one of the most secure buildings in the United Kingdom, after all. But apparently the palace is not fit for the spare to the throne. Harry didn't respond to the offer. Instead, he leaked a self-funded report about the colossal terror threat he faces to ITV News and told the rest of his family to stay away. That terror threat apparently only applied to London, and it was clear that if they were in Birmingham, for example, which is 2 hours drive away, it wouldn't apply.
That surprise turn pulled even more eyes onto the visit and left people wondering just how tightly the entire meeting had been planned and handled behind the scenes.
Prince Harry, the invitation for Prince Harry to stay at Buckingham Palace has been withdrawn. He's coming to Britain today.
After much speculation, a Duke of Sussex spokesperson confirmed the offer, as Andrew says, has been withdrawn at the last.
As the situation unfolded, Tom Bower argues that King Charles may have started to notice a bigger pattern at play. In Bower's view, this was not just a straightforward moment of a father meeting his son. He suggests the king may have seen it as part of a broader effort by Harry and Meghan to rebuild their relationship with the royal family after stepping back from royal duties. That interpretation, of course, is Bower's reading of the situation, but it adds another layer to how people have been discussing the visit online.
He wants it, though, because he wants to make it in a royal tour.
Of course.
Yes.
He wants to monetize his presence here.
Of course.
And the palace quite rightly said, on the day of the Daily Mail judgment, when you're going to be called unreliable, you're not going to then walk back into Buckingham Palace and besmirch the royal family even more.
According to Bower, rebuilding that connection could also, in his view, bring back some of the credibility, status, and public value that can come with being seen as closely tied to the monarchy. That is why he closes with a pointed warning for the king, and why so many people are now watching his advice so closely. And that is exactly why the reaction around this visit kept growing, because once people started tying the meeting to bigger questions about image and influence, the whole thing stopped looking like a simple private call. Online discussion quickly shifted from the visit itself to what it might have signaled about control, trust, and who was actually setting the tone behind closed doors. Some viewers pointed to the careful way the moment was described as possible evidence that every detail had been weighed in advance, while others pushed back and said the public was reading far too much into a situation that remains open to interpretation. Even so, the debate did not fade, since the meeting now sat inside a much larger conversation about royal ties, public perception, and why even a brief encounter can take on so much meaning when the stakes are this high.
All that was all fueled from Montecito. Well, that has all now gone sour. That's all now gone really bad for the Sussexes. So they have
What was the objective in them doing that?
Well, to get to resurrection, be the royal family, somehow find a way in which they could monetize themselves through being accepted again in Britain. But of course, they're not apologizing. They have no contrition for the terrible things they've done over the last 5 years. So I never understood exactly how they thought it would play out.
Harry may not have realized just how closely the whole situation was being watched. After all, his father is not only his father, he is also the king. In Tom Bower's view, Charles was well aware that several of Harry and Meghan's post-royal ventures had been facing growing pressure. Some of their Hollywood projects had reportedly run into setbacks, and public interest around them had started to cool. Meghan's lifestyle brand was also said to be dealing with a few hurdles, while some of Harry's charity ties had become more complicated than before. That was part of the bigger backdrop surrounding the visit.
Well, they do have access. They do have flats, apartments in St. James's Palace, which I think should be taken away from them. I mean, initially, my feeling was that the sins of the parents should be visited on their children, but I've changed my opinion on that now, because I hadn't realized at the time how they really had exploited their titles for financial benefit. I knew they were lazy and they'd had 10, 15 holidays a year at other people's expense.
In Bower's view, those developments may have given the king important context for why this renewed push to reconnect was happening right now, and why the timing could not be ignored.
When Chandauka denounces Harry as a racist and a bully, and that was, obviously for Harry, absolute disaster. He left the charity soon after, and the charity still survives, but obviously his reputation was severely dented.
By the time these concerns were being raised, the Highgrove meeting had already been arranged. According to Tom Bower, pulling the plug at the last minute could have sparked even more speculation and a fresh wave of unwanted headlines. So, in his telling, King Charles reportedly took a different route. Rather than cancel the encounter, he allowed it to go ahead, but under tightly managed terms and with clear boundaries already in place. And as Bower describes it, those limits would end up shaping everything that unfolded over the next 47 minutes. That is why the discussion around the meeting kept building, because once people believed the visit was happening under strict limits, every small detail started to matter even more. Online, some viewers read that as a sign the situation was far more delicate than it first appeared, while others said the chatter was turning a private family moment into something bigger than the facts could support. Still, the public reaction kept circling back to the same point, whether this was a real attempt at repair or simply a carefully managed encounter designed to avoid any unwanted surprises. And that uncertainty only made the story feel more charged, since even the briefest gesture between them was now being examined through the lens of trust, timing, and how much control each side may have wanted to keep.
Friday, it transpired that 20 cars went into the Gloucester home of the King and Queen, Highgrove House, for some function to do with some organisation. And hidden within those 20 cars was, indeed, Harry, Meghan, Prince Archie. Is he Prince Archie? I have no idea. Archie and Lilibet, reuniting with their grandfather for the first time in 4 years.
According to Tom Bauer, King Charles had no intention of approaching this meeting the same way he may have in the past. If there was once a more open approach, Bauer suggests that had clearly shifted by now. This time, everything appears to have been carefully controlled. The meeting was kept private, tightly managed, and notably brief. In Bauer's telling, those details were not random at all, but deliberate boundaries meant to make sure nothing from the visit was misunderstood or stretched beyond what the king intended.
So I think gradually the king has become much, more respected than he might have been. Mm-hmm. And he is, in fact, highly respected now, as is the Queen. And they had to fight hard to get to that. So I think the sympathy at the moment is all in their favour. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to let all their hard work. And you've got to remember, and they're not going to cause an argument with William and Kate, mm-hmm. who have absolutely no intention of in any way allowing the rehabilitation of the Sussexes here. So I think it's the royal family versus the Sussexes. And today, the royal family won.
According to Tom Bauer, Meghan may have been expecting a much warmer welcome after spending several years away from the United Kingdom, but in his view, that was not how the meeting came across. Instead of the kind of heartfelt family reunion some people might have imagined, the encounter reportedly felt formal, restrained, and emotionally distant. Rather than pointing to a fresh beginning, Bauer suggests it reflected just how much the relationship may have changed and how carefully every exchange was being managed behind the scenes.
Of course, they went on this trip to the UK. There was a bit of will they, won't they? Harry goes by himself, and then suddenly Meghan Markle with the kids in they trot as well. But there have been some reports that the family reunion that they had with the King and the Queen may have not gone as planned for Meghan. There are some suggestions that it probably wasn't warm and fuzzy. I can't imagine why.
According to Tom Bauer, the meeting seemed to send a pretty unmistakable signal. In his view, even if Harry and Meghan were hoping to repair ties with the royal family, there was no automatic path back into the role of working royals. He suggests the monarchy may have been setting firm boundaries here and making it clear that any future relationship would likely have to happen on very different terms. That message, as he frames it, was hard to miss. That is also why the conversation around it refused to settle down. Once the meeting started being seen as controlled rather than casual, every part of it began carrying extra meaning, from the timing to the tone to what was left unsaid. Some online commentators treated that as a sign the palace may have wanted to keep things on a very tight leash, while others argued people were reading too much into a private exchange that no one outside the room fully understood. Either way, the reaction showed how sensitive this relationship still is, because even a short visit can quickly turn into a larger debate about trust, distance, and whether either side is actually ready to move forward. And with those questions still hanging in the air, the public discussion only became more intense.
You say she'd have been chuffed to bits. Do you think it would have been awkward for her with Charles and Camilla?
I think the whole thing might have been a bit awkward.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure they would have briefed them and said, right, no pictures, no reporting to the press. There would have been definite confirmation of ground rules. Because what we don't want, the royal family don't want, is that a couple of weeks down the line, we have a bare-all interview from Harry saying, what went on at the meeting, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. So that, I think, has to be the most important outcome of this. No leaking, no telling of what went on at the meeting. If it does, then that will further erode trust between other members of the royal family.
In Bauer's view, that old era had faded, the one where being closely linked to the royal family could once instantly boost a person's public image or business appeal. According to his framing, that kind of advantage no longer seemed to work the same way.
Their problem is that they've got no future. I mean, as ever, all her products, of course, is a complete disaster. She's got no Netflix series. She hasn't got any project at all. And they are literally wallowing in in a maze where to go. And so predictably. And so that is the problem. And for them to come back in the midst of the current royal crisis here.
According to Tom Bauer, the meeting appeared to serve two major purposes. First, in his view, it made one point very hard to ignore. Harry and Meghan were not being welcomed back as working members of the royal family. Second, Bauer suggests the encounter was handled with careful control to help shield King Charles from future criticism. With questions already swirling around Harry's accommodation and the ongoing security dispute, there was real concern online that the situation could later be framed as the king turning his son and grandchildren away from the United Kingdom. So, as Bauer sees it, the whole arrangement was designed to avoid giving critics an easy storyline.
King Charles and Queen Camilla hosted Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and the couple's two children this afternoon. Reunion took place at Highgrove House, the monarch's private country residence in Gloucestershire, England. No images are expected to be released from the reunion, and no further details will be provided, as it was a private family meeting. Wow. So this is interesting because it's like, clearly, was that part of the deal where the king's like, okay, we're going to let it out, know that you were here, but we're going to make it clear it was private. There are no images and no more to come from it. And therefore, if anything else comes from it, they'll be able to point it to Harry, is how this sort of feels like.
In Bauer's view, Charles agreeing to the meeting under such tightly controlled conditions suggested something very specific. He seemed open to seeing Harry, but he was also making the limits crystal clear, so no one could mistake the visit for a full reset or read too much into what it meant. That kind of setup naturally kept people talking, because once a meeting is seen as restricted, every small detail starts getting picked apart online. Supporters of that view argued the carefully managed format said as much as the meeting itself, while critics pushed back and said a private royal conversation should not be treated like a public statement. The split reaction is what kept the story alive, since the discussion was never only about who met whom, but about what the arrangement seemed to signal to everyone watching from the outside. And with trust already fragile, even the smallest gesture was enough to trigger another round of speculation.
That Harry would be able to say, my dad's left me out in the cold. Here's my dad not protecting me with security again. I guess my dad doesn't want to see his grandchildren. Because that is what I was concerned about. And I think I even said to you, could this all be a scheme, a setup to blackmail the king into showing up at Birmingham next year, which you've said yourself was the ultimate goal for Prince Harry, to have that royal presence.
According to Tom Bauer, King Charles seemed to understand how that situation could be interpreted, and he wanted to stop that narrative from taking hold. In Bauer's view, by allowing Harry to visit Highgrove and keeping the family contact private, the king was showing that he was not completely closing the door on his son. Instead, Bauer suggests Charles was sending a much more measured message, one that signaled distance, caution, and control, rather than any full public reconciliation.
The only thing that was interesting that I kind of did guess that the meeting, I did have a feeling if it took place it would be at Highgrove, only because of how, I'm sure you've been to Highgrove, Matt, but it's in a very secluded, very private location, so it just made sense.
Well, I think it did make sense, and it was a coup for Prince Harry to get that face-to-face meeting with his father, with Meghan back on royal property, and a face-to-face between the king and his grandchildren. Quite the moment for the family.
The real obstacle, according to Bauer's interpretation, was not a lack of willingness to see Harry. It was the breakdown of trust after years of public disagreements, plus the consequences of choices Harry and Meghan had already made. In his view, the meeting tried to balance compassion with firm boundaries, so a private family relationship could be kept separate from any hint of a return to royal duties.
William and Kate and the King and Queen rebuild trust and respect, and the quicker the Sussexes leave Britain, the better. The question is only whether they go quietly and stay quiet, or whether they scream to earn a bit more money at the royal family's expense. That is the untold answer.
According to Tom Bower, another reason the Highgrove meeting stayed so tightly controlled was Queen Camilla's presence. In his view, her being there was anything but routine. Bower suggests that, after seeing many of the moments that reportedly strained Harry's relationship with the royal family over the years, Camilla understood how important it was to keep the conversation clear, limited, and accountable. That, in his interpretation, added another layer of caution to the entire encounter. That is exactly why the online reaction kept building, because people were not just reacting to the visit itself, they were reading into who was present, who was kept out, and what that silence might have meant. Once a family meeting becomes part of a larger public story, every detail starts to carry extra weight, and that is what made this one feel so loaded. Some viewers saw the tight control as proof that the royals wanted to avoid more confusion, while others argued it simply showed how cautious the whole situation had become after so much tension. Either way, the conversation quickly shifted from a simple visit to a much bigger question about whether any real repair was possible without trust being rebuilt first. And that is the part people kept coming back to, because the arrangement itself seemed to suggest that even small steps forward were still happening under a very careful watch.
Camilla didn't like it, and Harry didn't like it, so that's much more important than the king liking his wife. But anyway, she was there, and she was there just to make sure everything was calm.
Yes.
Because Harry could have gone shouting, and Camilla wouldn't be able to say what she would want to say. She probably didn't give them a jam or honey, as a present and to help her thing going, because there were no pictures. So really, I was quite shocked the king saw them, because I felt he can't actually be so close. But actually thinking about it and looking things up, it was quite clever.
Her presence, he suggested, meant there was another trusted person in the room who could help verify what was actually said and reduce the chance of later disagreements over how the meeting unfolded. In that sense, she was the witness, you could say. To some commentators, this suggested that King Charles no longer fully trusted Harry, and they viewed that as a cautious, even sensible move.
Well, no, I know where you're coming from, because obviously, as I say, it re-establishes their royal credentials, albeit they are no longer working royals. The fact is they can pop in and have tea. I hope they had Highgrove jam, which is far better than the Meghan slop that she calls spread. So I got to taste what real produce tastes like from the Highgrove shop. But the point is, I think it is not quite the PR success that they wanted, because they've been told it's private, and private it shall remain.
When the meeting wrapped up, Meghan Markle reportedly seemed to be hoping it could mark a turning point. But in Tom Bower's version of events, that moment never really arrived. There was no official photo, no public sign of reconciliation, and no image that made it look like the relationship had been fully repaired.
But the truth of the matter is, it was probably an hour. If they leak anything at all, right, that's it forever, and they know that. If it is just what it is, how much does that benefit the Sussex brand? Not much. I asked you why she was furious, because I think she'll be furious about that. I think she'll be furious about the 20 million. I think she might well be furious because she sussed out that none of us want her in our bloody country.
In Bower's view, that was deliberate. He argues the palace was careful not to create any photo moment that could later be read as proof that Harry and Meghan had somehow returned to their former royal standing. And in that reading, the silence after the meeting said just as much as the meeting itself, if not more. And that is why the discussion kept spreading online, because people were not treating this as just another family visit. They were reading it as a sign of how fragile things still were, and whether the people involved were trying to manage the story before it could take on a life of its own. Some viewers argued that this kind of caution made sense after so much public tension, while others saw it as a sign that even basic trust was still missing. What made it stand out was not just the meeting itself, but the feeling that every small detail had to be handled with extra care. In internet commentary, that kind of careful staging often says as much as a public statement, and that is exactly why the reaction did not fade quickly. It kept circling back to the same point, that the real issue was never only who showed up, but whether anyone believed the situation was stable enough to move forward at all.
But of course, they're not apologising. They have no contrition for the terrible things they've done over the last 5 years. So I never understood exactly how they thought it would play out, except that Harry was blackmailing his father.
Yes.
Do you want to see your grandchildren or not?
According to Tom Bauer, the meeting did not appear to deliver the kind of outcome Harry and Meghan may have been hoping for. He says there was no apology, no sign that their former role was being restored, and no indication that their royal standing would be reconsidered. In Bauer's view, King Charles was not prepared to brush aside years of public criticism and family tension by handing back the privileges they once had. Instead, the encounter seemed to underline one very clear point: keeping a personal relationship alive is not the same thing as returning to royal duties.
Basically, they stated that His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, Prince William, and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had no idea about His Majesty the King finally re-meeting up with the Sussexes and their 2 mysterious children that he's never really met, right? That's the story. The true story is that's absolute rubbish, right? I can just tell you that 100% for a fact. William and Catherine are in all discussions with the King. They are very close. Yes, they have their arguments. There's no, I mean, it's a family, it's a business, it's, you know, that's the gig. But, you know, there is no way the King would have pounced that particular story on them.
After the Highgrove meeting did not seem to deliver the result Harry and Meghan were reportedly hoping for, attention quickly moved in another direction. According to critics of the couple, the conversation started centering more on their children. They argued that highlighting the family connection could help build a stronger emotional tie with King Charles and maybe open the door to a more sympathetic response later on. Tom Bauer sees that as another sign that the strategy may have shifted. In his view, instead of pushing for a return through official royal duties, the focus appeared to move toward rebuilding personal relationships. But whether that approach can actually work remains uncertain, and that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the discussion going.
Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. I'm really surprised that those 2 want the kids to have titles bestowed upon them by a racist organisation that they loathe. I didn't really understand that.
Yes, she wants to have that because this is what she's created from her body or from her life. She's got 2 children who are royals. She doesn't like it, but she likes it for the kids. And I think it's awful for them because I think children would be attacked and bullied when they've got a very long thing like what they've got, you know. And I think that she just thinks that she's achieved something marvellous. But she doesn't actually think that things are very clever.
But Bauer believes the Highgrove meeting made one thing very clear. The palace appears determined to keep private family relationships completely separate from any idea of a return to working royal life. In that reading, the message was subtle but unmistakable. Personal contact is one thing, but any larger royal role is another question entirely. That is why the reaction online kept widening instead of settling down. Some viewers felt the whole episode showed just how delicate the balance still is, while others argued that every carefully managed detail only made the distance feel more obvious. In those discussions, the visit was not being treated as a simple family moment, but as another sign of how much the public still watches every move for hidden meaning. And once that kind of interpretation takes hold, it becomes hard to pull the conversation back to something ordinary. Critics and supporters started reading the same silence in very different ways, with one side seeing restraint and the other seeing a clear lack of progress. No official confirmation has changed that picture, so the debate keeps coming back to the same uncertain point, whether private contact can ever be separated from the larger royal tension around it.
And the King, not being in his best of health and all the rest of that, and being a man who on the whole probably wants to see his grandchildren, wavered. I think that now, that ship has passed. I think that the Sussex's dream of somehow finding a role here, half in, half out, I think that is now passed.
According to Tom Bauer, King Charles was said to be trying to walk a very careful line. He reportedly wanted to stay open to a relationship with his grandchildren, but Bauer suggested he was just as determined not to let that family connection turn into a path back into working royal life for Harry and Meghan. In Bauer's view, the king's main concern was protecting the monarchy's long-term stability and avoiding anything that could create fresh pressure around the couple's future role. That would mean showing warmth and compassion in private, while holding back from any public move that might be read as restoring the Sussexes' former position or giving them a major public relations win. In that reading, even a small gesture could carry a much bigger message, and that is exactly why every detail of the situation kept drawing attention.
One thing that makes her interesting is that she married a royal. So trying to run away from that is just a terrible brand strategy. It's an awful thing too on a human level, on a family level, but I don't think for 1 minute she wanted to meet the king so that she could fix this family. I think it was a business decision, a business idea, and so she desperately wanted a photograph. We know the world we live in. We know the world of social media. We want to see a picture of the king, of Meghan, of the children, of Harry, of everybody smiling. The palace said absolutely not. This is not a state visit. This is not even an official visit. This is a family visit. And so there's no photographs. And so because of that, I think that's the clearest example I have of why this didn't exactly work out the way she wanted it to. She wanted the king's embrace.
According to Tom Bower, King Charles also seemed to understand the wider consequences of any public sign of reconciliation. In Bower's view, a warm and highly visible welcome could have sparked confusion about Harry and Meghan's future role, and might even have complicated the already clear line of succession leading to Prince William. That is why, he argues, the meeting stayed private, tightly managed, and deliberately limited. The message, as Bower sees it, was simple. Keeping a family connection was one thing, but creating any impression of a return to working royal life was something else entirely, and the palace was not willing to blur that boundary.
The firm, the royal family, the management of the royal family, and Harry and Meghan, in regard to Harry's accommodation, with this extraordinary row over Buckingham Palace and whether or not rooms were offered.
Yeah, well, the first thing, Mark, is I'm sure you're aware with Buckingham Palace, there's always rooms. There's always accommodation. We would never, ever put in the impression, when I worked there, that if somebody wanted a room, especially a member of the family, we're the ones that will give them the moment's notice, So I find this very hard to believe. I think quite simply, the way Harry dealt with it, I think the palace thought, do you know what? We're going to take back control of the situation and, give a very polite response and just say that, with the time frame and everything, it's not possible to fulfill his request.
In the end, Tom Bower argues that Harry and Meghan walked away with far less than they may have hoped for. In his account, the result was limited to a private family meeting and nothing beyond that. There was no new security arrangement, no stay at Buckingham Palace, no public appearance with King Charles, and no sign that their former royal role was being restored. Bower's view is that this was not some random outcome. He believes the palace made a very deliberate choice to draw a firm line between keeping a private family connection and reopening any door to working royal life. And if his read on the situation is accurate, then the Highgrove meeting was not the start of any royal comeback. It was a reminder that this chapter remains firmly closed. When the meeting wrapped after just 47 minutes, it reportedly ended without any major breakthrough, and that is exactly why the discussion kept lingering online, because people were not just reacting to one short visit, they were reading it as part of a much bigger royal pattern. Some viewers saw the tight control around the meeting as evidence that nothing had really shifted, while others felt the lack of a public gesture said more than any statement ever could. With no official explanation to settle the debate, the same moment kept being revisited from every angle, and the uncertainty itself became the story. That kind of reaction makes even the smallest detail feel loaded, especially when the public already expects hidden meaning in every royal move.
The palace was very smart on this one. They said, come and meet him. He's an old man. He wants to meet the grandkids. He's a father here. He's not a king. He's a grandfather here. He's not a king. And because of all that, because of all the above, there will be no official photographer there. There'll be no photographs leaked. And so I think here that she didn't exactly get what she wants, and she certainly didn't win. A lot of us were frightened that Meghan would be able to manipulate the king, but I think in this instant, nothing has changed. They met for an hour and a half, they had tea, they talked about stuff that had no big relevance, small talk. There's no one better than the royal family for making chit-chat. If ever you've been around the royals, they say nothing. It's like cotton candy. They just talk.
According to Tom Bower's account, there was still no agreement about Harry's future in the United Kingdom, and no clear resolution to the ongoing security concerns he has discussed. In that telling, the meeting did not produce the kind of breakthrough some people may have been expecting. After the visit, Meghan was said to have left Highgrove with the children and headed back to Montecito, while Harry stayed behind to continue with his Invictus Games commitments. For Bauer, that outcome said a lot. Even with all the attention built around the meeting, the major questions were still left hanging, and the palace gave no public indication that its position had shifted at all.
Well, Meghan is furious because she hasn't done everything she wanted. When they knew they were going to come to the UK and London, she sent a list of what she wanted done for her at Buckingham Palace. Can you believe that? But they didn't go to a palace. They went to a home, and she didn't get what she wanted.
In the end, this is how Tom Bauer says the 47-minute Highgrove meeting reportedly played out. In his view, what many had expected to be a step toward rebuilding family ties instead appeared to some as a clear sign that the palace had set firm boundaries. Whether you agree with Bauer's reading or see it differently, the visit has clearly stirred up debate about Harry, Meghan, and where things seem to stand with the royal family. If this story got you thinking about those limits and what they could mean next, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone following the royal drama, and comment with your take. See you on the next one.